The Warrens began investigating spirit phenomena in the mid-1940s, but not until the 1970s did they really come into public view. Wherever bizarre or ominous activity took place, it seemed the Warrens were always there. In 1972, for example, the ghost of a 19th century manservant became active in the superintendent's mansion at West Point and began harassing guests of the commanding general. Now, do I think it was the ghost of that manservant? No, it was a demon playing that role. But when you're at West Point and the commanding general, you're not talking about the local nut. The ghost of a 19th century manservant became active in the superintendent's mansion at West Point and began harassing guests of the commanding general. It was the Warrens, the New York papers later reported, whom the Army called in to confront this rogue spirit and put a stop to its antics. Early in 1974, the Warrens were again in the public eye. This time they were briefly seen at the conclusion of a case where exorcism by a Roman Catholic priest had to be performed in a home that was being plundered by invisible vandals that were even attacking people. Later in the year, the Warrens were again in the news, this time on network television, when a home in southern New England was being rocked by some of the most incredible poltergeist activity on record. The cause of the disturbances in both cases, Ed says knowingly, was demonic. But it was not until 1976, when they were brought in to investigate reports of yet another outbreak of demoniacal activity in Amityville, was national attention fully trained on Ed and Lorraine Warren and their extraordinary work in the field of supernatural phenomena. And it was during that same period, 75 and 76, that we were so active in the Hartford station in New England. And they became regular listeners. Who are these two people seen in the background of news photographs but hardly ever identified? What are they like? Why do they do the kind of work they do? Although one would think that people who involve themselves in demonology must necessarily be caught up in the macabre, Ed and Lorraine Warren are not occultists or eccentrics, nor are they engaged in some kind of religious crusade. On the contrary, the Warrens' perception of life is anything but negative. Indeed, the Warrens are effective in their work only because they are such positive people. Together, Ed and Lorraine Warren are a cordial, happy couple in their mid-50s who have a unique friendship and marriage and distinctly positive outlook on life. But what the Warrens have seen, however, and what they've learned over the course of their extraordinary combined career has given them wisdom way beyond their years. Today, not surprisingly, the question most frequently asked of Ed and Lorraine Warren is what really happened in the Amityville case? As Ed explains it, the existence of spirits is not a matter of belief, it's a matter of evidence. In fact, the question is not so much a matter of whether the phenomena is there, but why is it there? Like for years, parapsychology or extrasensory perception was pooh-poohed by the scientists and the naturalists. Now, after years of major universities gathering evidence, the fact of extrasensory perception and the phenomenon called parapsychology is no longer even a question, only to the ignorant. To those in the know of these long-ranging university projects, parapsychology is a fact. The issue now is how and why it happens. The question on existence of spirits is not so much a matter of whether the phenomena is there, but why is it there? And spirits in this context is used of evil spirits. Why is it so incredibly meddlesome in human affairs? Beyond Amityville. Outside Ed Warren's office in Fairfield County, an old chapel clock ticked away the passing moments with quiet mechanical precision. All else stood still. It was the middle of a cold, dark night in New England. Inside the office, a brass lamp lit the desk where Ed Warren, a pensive, gray-haired man of 50, sat working. Hundreds of books surrounded him, most bearing strange, arcane titles on the mysterious lore of demonology. Above the desk hung photographs of monks and grim-faced exorcists standing with Ed Warren in abbey-like settings. For Ed, working in the still silence of the night, it had been a wicked day and one that was not yet over. Just before the hour, 3 a.m., the clock movement came alive in a series of clicks and relays, finally churning up 3 somber, resonating bongs. At the third stroke, Ed looked up, listened into the darkness, then went back to writing. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, the true witching hour, demon time. And now, unbeknownst to him, Ed Warren was on borrowed time. Only hours before, Ed and Lorraine Warren had returned to their home in Connecticut after having been called in to investigate claims of a haunted house on Long Island's South Shore in a pleasant residential suburb of New York City. In December 1975, the house had been purchased by George and Kathleen Lutz, who moved into it around Christmas of that year with their 3 young children. A year before the Lutzes bought the house, the eldest son of the previous owner murdered the 6 sleeping members of his family at 3:15 in the morning of November 13th, 1974, with a .35 caliber rifle, as reported in the New York Times, November 15th, 1974. On January 15th, 1976, the Lutzes fled from the house, contending that they had been victimized by manifest supernatural forces. That was a case that later came to be known as the Amityville Horror. By the end of January 1976, the press had become fully aware of the Lutz family's claim of a bizarre experience in the house and promptly called experts into the case. The experts brought in were Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens were consulted because in professional circles they are considered to be perhaps this country's leading authorities on the subject of spirits and supernatural phenomena. Over the course of some 3 decades, Ed and Lorraine Warren have investigated over 3,000 paranormal and supernatural disturbances. The question the news media had essentially wanted answered was whether there was a, quote, ghost in the house at the time. The answer the Warrens gave at the end of their 3-day investigation, however, was something no one had bargained for. Indeed, their answer literally strained credulity. Yes, the Warrens disclosed at the time, in our judgment, there was a spirit that had plagued the Lutzes in the house. But they also concluded no ghost was present. What did this paradoxical statement mean? Did this imply there were other kinds of spirits than ghosts? Incredibly, the answer the Warrens gave was yes. There are 2 types of spirits that are encountered in true haunting situations, the Warrens explained on March 6, 1976. One is human. The other, however, is inhuman.